Happy Halloween, Houdat Nation. No scares here. It's just Brendan Boylan and Bob Rose, your usual pregame show hosts. And Bob, we have a real interesting matchup, NFC South, between the Saints and the Bucs. But before we get into that, I want to talk about one of the greatest debates of all time. What is the best Halloween candy?
And happy Halloween to you, Brendan. Happy Halloween to all of you tuning in. I hope you guys have a safe but fun trick or treat. Me and little Will are going to go out for round two after halftime of the Bucs game today. And in my opinion, I've always been a fruit candy kind of guy. Sweet tarts, bottle caps, Skittles. But if you're going to go chocolate, to me, the top of the list has got to be Reese's peanut butter cups, especially the Reese's eggs that they used to make at Easter with the whipped peanut butter. Now they make different forms all year round. Spooky ghosts at Halloween, Christmas trees at Christmas. It lessens how special the Easter eggs were, but that's my favorite candy.
Yeah, Reese's peanut butter cups has always been mine. I'll go Reese's and Kit Kats. I think those are probably my top two in terms of chocolate. So hopefully you guys are able to collect, whether it's your kids' candy and you rate it a little bit. Hopefully you guys get some of your favorite candy this evening and in the early goings of the morning. But we got some football to attend to. As I said, a big one between the Saints and the Buccaneers. I actually circled this game at the beginning of the year, Bob, saying that depending on where the Saints were in terms of their record and the results of this game could really shape what happens the rest of the year. And if this Saints team is truly a playoff team, coming into this matchup, Bucs only one loss, New Orleans at 4-2 and could easily be 5-1. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, pretty much. As soon as the schedule came out, I had the last 2 weeks. Today's Tampa Bay game, which you knew was going to be a titanic NFC South showdown. And last week's Seattle game. Now, of course, that was before Russell Wilson, got hurt and Seattle's defense started playing so poorly. But the Saints still showed a lot of character in going into Seattle, hostile environment. They were shorthanded offensively themselves, and they really battled their way to a victory. Tampa Bay is a different kind of monster, obviously. This is the team that, their fan base, the Buccaneers fan base, wants so badly to be the Saints' top rival. While that's never going to happen, the feelings on the intensity between the two teams on the field over the last couple of years has kind of ratcheted up a couple of notches. And remember that this is the team that ended Drew Brees' career. That doesn't go unnoticed by not only the fans that will be in the Superdome this afternoon, but the men in that locker room that were so close to Drew and wanted so badly to get into the Super Bowl last year, not only for their quarterback, but for themselves. Tampa Bay has still got to be considered one of, if not the top contender, and not only the NFC, but the entire NFL. And I think that this is a great measuring stick for where the New Orleans Saints are right now at basically midseason, whether they are a true contender or whether they still have some things to clean up to get to that level.
Well, and remember, Bob, I don't remember off the top of my head which Buccaneer it was, but one Buccaneer player said back towards the beginning of this season, if the Saints would have beat the Bucs in the divisional round, he had no doubt that the Saints would be the eventual Super Bowl champions. And I think for a lot of people, that was the case. That game was going to determine who not just only represented the NFC, but one of those teams was certainly going to end up winning the whole thing, and that's what the Bucs were able to do. So going into this matchup, you said last week New Orleans still flat-footed offensively, could not get a whole lot going. Let's face it, Alvin Kamara not only saved the Saints, he saved my fantasy team last week as well. And I'm sure for a lot of people, he did that on Monday night. So New Orleans does get a couple healthy bodies back this week. Deonte Harris is officially active. Before we got on, we were talking about we just hope that the hamstring can hold up, because you know as well as I do, Bob, and you've probably suffered your fair share of hamstring injuries over the years. Those can be real naggy. Even when you're feeling 100%, it takes just the wrong step at the wrong time to go and re-injure. So we hope Harris is able to be healthy and well for the entirety of this game and the games to come. New Orleans also brings Kevin White back up for the second consecutive week from the practice squad. I'm still holding out hope for him after a poor performance last week, but I think it was the offense as a whole. So New Orleans, a lot of fans were hoping this was going to be the week for Michael Thomas. That's not the case. Thomas didn't practice at all this week. Taysom Hill didn't practice all this week, but they also get a reinforcement at the running back position. As everyone knows, Mark Ingram back in the black and gold after being traded for a 7th-round pick with Houston. So you get a couple fresh bodies, Bob. There's going to be a lot of emotion riding on the game, as you mentioned, just with how the season ended last year. Sean Payton said that seems like 10 years ago, but there's a lot riding on this game. Offensively, how does New Orleans come out and make sure they don't get off to that flat-footed start like they did last week in Seattle? And what are some things that the Saints can do early to maybe throw off that Buccaneers defense?
Well, Brendan, first of all, for those that have been asking, both of us all week long, what's Mark Ingram have left? Is he in football shape? Yeah, Mark is in football shape. He was the Texans' leading rusher at the time of the trade, and he was having himself a quietly solid season for an awful Houston team. And Mark knows this Sean Payton's offensive system pretty well. He's been gone for 2 years now. This would have been the third, but not a lot has changed. So I would anticipate Mark Ingram getting more snaps, than what people maybe think coming into this game. And if he's effective as a rusher, that allows the New Orleans Saints to move Alvin Kamara around even more than what they have the last couple of games against Washington and especially last week against Seattle. Kamara will continue to be the focus of this offense. I have little doubt, especially until Michael Thomas gets back. But if pieces like Mark Ingram as a rusher, Marquez Callaway or Deonte Harris as a receiver, if one of those guys can step up, that's going to create even more space for Alvin Kamara, who I think is going to be more effective as a receiver today than as a running back. But make no mistake, the Saints need to establish balance. The Buccaneers' pass defense, particularly their secondary because of injuries, has been suspect, but they still rush the passer as well as anybody. You cannot go into a game against Tampa Bay being one-dimensional. I realize that these are the best 2 run defenses in the NFL, New Orleans and Tampa Bay, with Tampa Bay slightly ahead of New Orleans as far as rushing average per game. But that's never stopped Sean Payton before. As long as the Saints remain patient, I think Jameis Winston and I know Jameis Winston is coming in with a major chip on his shoulder against the franchise that he played the first 5 years of his career for. And I think Winston's going to have a big game, but look for Sean Payton to call some plays to get Winston into a rhythm and a comfort zone very early on. I wouldn't be surprised to see a deep ball or two, probably in the first series. But other than that, it's going to be very quick passes, get the ball out of Jameis's hands quick to build some of that confidence and make sure that number 2 doesn't feel like he's pressing. Because both you and I believe that this is going to be a close game. But if one team is going to blow out the other, I can see Tampa Bay blowing out New Orleans under an avalanche of Jameis Winston turnovers. Now, Winston has played extremely well this year. I think much better than what people thought he was going to. And he's really been playing well the last 2 or 3 games. Even with the offensive struggles last week, I thought Jameis played an extremely gutsy game. He's taking care of the football. He's moving around in the pocket. You just have to get him into a rhythm because Jameis has been guilty of playing hero ball throughout his career. And while that makes for some gaudy passing numbers, it also throws turnovers up there fast and furious, and you cannot turn the ball over against this Tampa Bay team.
Well, I'm glad you said that, particularly with the passing numbers. One of the knocks on Jameis this season has been the passing numbers are at an all-time low, but you look at the touchdown-interception ratio, you look at passer rating, you look at how great New Orleans has been in the red zone this year, and I think most fans would take those numbers over Jameis throwing for 4,000 to 5,000 yards like he did in Tampa Bay. I want to stick with the running backs, though, because you made a good point saying both these teams, 1 and 2 in the NFL in terms of rush defense. You look back at Alvin Kamara last season in the 2 regular season games, only 116 scrimmage yards in both those matchups combined, but he did find the end zone 3 times. So how important is it, like you said, to find those matchups for Kamara, and how much easier is it going to be now that he has his best friend back and Boom and Zoom are reunited?
Again, if Mark Ingram can be effective as a rusher, that's going to make Alvin Kamara's job that much easier. I really like the rhythm and the timing that Kamara and Winston have built up over the last 2 games, especially has been evident. Before last season's struggles against Tampa Bay for Kamara, he had always balled out against the Buccaneers, and he has 10 touchdowns in 9 meetings against them. But again, most of that effectiveness has come as a receiver. He has 52 career receptions for 485 yards, but he does have 6 touchdowns rushing. So once the Saints get near the goal line, his history tells us against Tampa Bay that Kamara is the guy that they look to first and foremost. As you pointed out all week, Tampa Bay has a pair of very athletic linebackers. Usually one team is just lucky enough to have one that can keep pace with a guy like Kamara, but both Levante David and Devin White can individually keep up with Kamara as good as any linebacker can. Now, David's been a little banged up. In fact, he was limited in practice all week. He, Gronkowski, and Richard Sherman are going to be active today. No shocker there, but I'm interested to see how mobile that ankle is going to allow Levante David to be, because the Buccaneers also like to use both David and Devin as blitzers. But if Kamara starts to come out and have some effectiveness against them, or David isn't up to his normal standard of play, that's going to eliminate the interior blitz from those guys, because you've got to have at least one of those guys on Kamara as he lines up wide or comes out of the backfield. So it's going to be a chess match between Todd Bowles and Sean Payton all day as offensive and defensive play callers.
Well, let's talk about the other chess match, and one matchup that Saints fans love to highlight every time they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's flip it to the defensive side for New Orleans and talk about Marshawn Lattimore, who I said could be a dark horse defensive player of the year candidate with how well he has played. He loves going up against Mike Evans, and we saw very aggressive Marshawn Lattimore on Monday against DK Metcalf. And outside of that big touchdown, he shut Metcalf down from that point forward. How do you see this matchup going? Obviously, Lattimore has owned Evans over the years, but this is a matchup that's got pay-per-view written all over it, Bob.
Yeah, it sure does. It will be an absolute war between Evans and Lattimore, two players who legitimately have dislike for each other. Evans won't even give Lattimore credit, the proper credit when he has been interviewed for containing him. He just, he shovels credit towards the Saints defense and the Saints secondary as a whole. And while there is something to that, this is a team game after all, and it's a team effort to shut down a guy like Mike Evans. Marshawn Lattimore is the kind of guy that you take and you put on the opposition's best receiver, and that is Mike Evans. In 9 games against each other, Evans has only caught 50% of his targets, for 27 receptions for 439 yards. Now, he had 2 really good games against Lattimore in 2018. So if you take that out of the equation, in 7 games against Lattimore, Evans has only caught 16 passes, 39% of his targets for only 206 yards. And 4 of those 7 meetings, Mike has caught either 1 pass or been shut out altogether. This is a war. These two are going to go physically at it all day long. But a guy like Tom Brady, that's not going to stop him from going Mike Evans' direction. However, I do think Brady is going to target the rookie Paulson Adebo early and often wherever Adebo lines up, which will likely be on Chris Godwin, who has had some good games against the Saints in his career. There'll be no Antonio Brown today. Gronkowski, we don't know how effective he's going to be, but we know he's dangerous. O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate are both extremely good tight ends. But Godwin versus Adebo is every bit as important to this defensive success as is Lattimore and Mike Evans. So, that's going to be a war between the Saints defensive backs and receivers all day long.
Well, keeping it with the defensive side of the ball, part of disrupting Tom Brady is certainly getting in Tom Brady's face, and the Saints get a huge part of that defensive line back in David Onyemata, who has served his 6-game, not 6-week suspension. And Cameron Jordan even talked about how important it was to bring a guy like Onyemata back. Now, the Saints will be without Peyton Turner for the 2nd consecutive week. They do have Davenport. They do have Jordan. And now they have a guy in the middle in Onyemata who certainly will take up some of that space that's going to open it up on the outside. How important is David Onyemata, not just in this game, but moving forward throughout the season?
Oh, gosh, it's so crucial. And while the Saints defensive tackles have played well against the run, they have been 0 factor as pass rushers. And I believe that that's been a big part of the problem for the New Orleans pass rush, which has been disappointing thus far this year. You don't have that kind of inside guy that can consistently create interior pressure or cause opponents to double and triple team him on passing situations. And as a result, the opposition has been able to double team both the Saints edge rushers, which is, they've been still getting pressure on the quarterback. It's just come late and, didn't have much effect, in altering an opposing quarterback's throw. Now you have to respect Onyemata, and I expect this guy to come in great shape. Now, football shape might be a different story. We might see him on a limited snap count. But, Onyemata is the kind of guy that can create a momentum shift because of interior pressure. Even if he doesn't get the sack or pressure himself, the Buccaneers have to respect that. And as a result, it's going to leave either Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, or Tano Passigno, who's had a great season so far, in one-on-one coverage on the outside. Now, the Buccaneers have a terrific right tackle in Wirfs, but the left tackle, Donovan Smith, has had some struggles against Cam Jordan and the Saints in general, throughout his career. We saw the Saints successfully pressure Brady very heavily during those 2 regular season matchups, and they flat out pummeled him. And that was the difference between a win and a loss in those 2 regular season games compared to the playoff game where they weren't able to get as much pressure.
How important are the running backs for Tampa Bay today and against this New Orleans defense that's been so strong? Do you see Leonard Fournette having a good day in what is a homecoming for the LSU product? Well,
Fournette had a good day in the playoff game. Tom Brady did not beat the New Orleans Saints last January, not even close. It was Leonard Fournette and the Tampa Bay defense and capitalizing on turnovers. Fournette is their leading receiver out of the backfield. He's their leading rusher. Don't overlook Ronald Jones either. He's a more than capable back. But Fournette has taken control of the number 1 back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Just like we talked about with Kamara and Ingram and, rushing yards being hard fought against Tampa Bay, rushing yards are going to be equally contested against New Orleans. But New Orleans has to eliminate the threat of a run, force Tampa Bay to be one-dimensional if that pass rush is going to have a chance to get to Brady. Brady uses that short pass as an extension of the running game as well as any quarterback who's ever played. It's one of the few categories that I will put Tom Brady at the top of the all-time list in. Fournette has to be contained by Demario Davis and or Pete Werner, both of whom are athletic enough to, or Quan Alexander, all 3 of whom are athletic enough to stay with Fournette out of the backfield. But that's going to be a very important one-on-one matchup to determine whether the Saints are successful against a top-ranked Tampa Bay passing offense.
Now, for Tom Brady, he has not played in the Superdome in a full crowd in quite a long time. Now, you're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. You would immediately think, well, the crowd wouldn't, Bob, we'll save that argument for another day of the week. But, you have a quarterback with that much experience in the NFL, and you say, the crowd may not have as much of an effect on him as maybe a younger player. But coming into the Superdome as a guy who spent majority of his career in the AFC, not being there and not having that type of environment week in and week out or twice a year or what have you, how effective will the Who Dat Nation be in what should be one of the biggest Halloween parties across the United States today?
Who Dat Nation, I expect to come out with full vocal cords, a roar, and absolutely intense. It's important for the Saints to get off to a good start. If they get down early or are struggling, in any facet of the game, the crowd noise might not be a factor. But I'll tell you what, you hit Tom Brady a couple of times as he throws, forces his pass to be off target a little bit. That crowd noise coupled in on top of that, Tom Brady gets flustered. That's one of the reasons, more easily than people realize. That's one of the reasons why I don't have him anywhere close to the very top of my all-time quarterback list. So crowd noise is going to be very important. It's not that you're going to confuse Brady, but the other 10 players on that offense have to be on the same page as your quarterback. And if they can't hear or they get confused with the play calls, Tom gets really, really flustered. And I see your comment, Tara Henry. Yeah, Tom Brady gets shaken up. He will get in the face of his teammates. And we saw it last year twice, and didn't have anything to do with crowd noise, but just the aggressive style of play that New Orleans came at Brady with, it kind of snowballed in a negative way for that Tampa Bay offense. And you factor in crowd noise, and it's going to snowball. It could snowball even faster.
No Antonio Brown, as we mentioned. We highlighted Chris Godwin as a potential playmaker. Obviously, Gronkowski, you don't know what you're going to get week to week, even when he is healthy at this point of his NFL career. Who is a hidden X factor on this Tampa Bay offense that Saints fans should look out for?
Like you said, we mentioned all the major names and why they're important. Tyler Johnson is going to take Antonio Brown's place in the lineup. Tyler isn't as dynamic as Antonio Brown, but he is a playmaker. He's a really very promising receiver in his second year. And most importantly, he has the trust of his quarterback. Tom Brady will look his direction in key moments. So the Saints can't overlook this guy. Luckily, they do have a deep coverage unit. Bradley Roby's probably going to see the field a lot today. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is going to have to play well in the slot. And my friend PJ Williams is probably going to be targeted every time he's on the field. If Brady goes away from a Debo too. So whoever draws the assignment of Tyler Johnson when the Buccaneers go to multiple receivers, Tyler is going to definitely be an X factor. Could be an X factor for Tampa Bay.
I'm glad you mentioned Bradley Roby, because you and I have talked about, look how great Paulson Debo has played this year to force Roby into being not the number 2 corner as many expected when the trade went through. However, I said this on my own podcast, any great offense in the league has 3, 4, and sometimes even 5 guys that can hurt you week in and week out. And if the Saints want to be a playoff team, they're going to need a guy like Bradley Roby down the stretch of the season to cover up where they need to. I think today's a great example of how important that Roby trade could end up being for the Saints in the long run, especially as they continue to fight for a divisional title. Going back to the New Orleans offensive side of the football, you and I talked about it at halftime. We haven't had a chance to really talk about it on the air since the injury to Andrews Pete happened, but we both said how important it was that Calvin Throckmorton actually had some quality experience this year, because he looks like he's going to be the left guard for the remainder of the season for the New Orleans Saints. What do you like out of Throckmorton, and how do you expect him to perform against a strong defense for Tampa Bay?
And Throckmorton is definitely going to be tested. Vita Vea and Dominican Sue are absolute monsters in the middle, not only as run defenders, but they're underrated pass rushers as well. And don't overlook William Golston. Everybody talks about Jason Pierre-Paul, Shaq Barrett, and the rookie Joe Tryon, but William Golston is right up there among their sack leaders for the last 2 years. But listen, Throckmorton is going to be tested inside. Throckmorton, Ruiz, and definitely Eric Foy, because Vita Vea and Dominican Sue could single-handedly wreck your blocking scheme. They are just so powerful. But Throckmorton has extremely good footwork for a big man, especially when you move him interior. He has excellent upper body strength. He plays with good leverage despite his height. And that's where Vita Vea beats opposing linemen, is leverage and power. So Vita Vea is going to test Throckmorton and Ruiz. If those guys are up to the challenge, I like the Saints' chances of giving Winston a clean interior pocket, which is probably going to be the key to the Saints' successful offensive performance.
We talked about early on that Richard Sherman is a go, but we know that this is a Buccaneers secondary that's been banged up throughout the season. Not necessarily a strength in this game for New Orleans, whose receiving corps has been banged up for what seems like forever, Bob. Who might be an X factor in that receiving corps for New Orleans today?
You got to go with Deonte Harris, mainly because of his health question. If Deonte Harris doesn't leave late in the first quarter of that playoff game against Tampa Bay, I believe Tampa Bay does not come out of there with a victory. Deonte was scorching them on kick returns, and he was going to be a big part of the New Orleans offense that day. If he's healthy, I think that we'll see that same kind of game plan from the Saints this afternoon. But Marquez Callaway has quietly been forming into a very good complementary receiver. Now, again, the Saints don't have a bona fide number 1 wideout. So, Callaway and Harris being good complementary receivers isn't going to mean much when you're going up against the top defensive backs for other teams. But I believe Callaway and Harris both have the ability to make plays against a shorthanded Tampa Bay cornerback unit.
Well, and I like that you said complementary pieces, and that's one thing I included in my fantasy football article this week about Marquez Callaway is simply right now, he's not a number one receiver, and trying to fill the shoes of a Michael Thomas for production on the field and certainly in your fantasy lineups just isn't going to happen. But when Thomas comes back, Callaway might be one of the most intriguing number two receivers in the NFC and certainly in fantasy football. So watch out for that in your waiver wires for the coming weeks. We talked about Mark Ingram. We talked about the offensive line for the Saints. We talked about the receivers. We talked a little bit about Jameis Winston. But I want to end our conversation with number two because he tried to play down as any quarterback would going up against the team that drafted you and ultimately the team that decided to move on from you. Now, being moved on for a guy who has as many Super Bowl rings as Tom Brady, you can't take that much of an insult. However, this is a game that I know Jameis has had circled all year. Even last year, knowing that he was the backup quarterback, he knew at some point he was going to get that opportunity to face Tampa Bay. He does it in front of a huge New Orleans crowd. For Jameis to walk away with a victory for the Saints, and maybe even in his eyes, it be a successful first appearance against his former team, what does Jameis have to do?
He has to stay calm, remain focused, and not let his emotions get out of hand. Because I know what it's like as an athlete or coach, when you go up against a former team of yours, or special friends, special relationships, that kind of thing. So I know to a lesser extent what Jameis is going through up here and right here. He needs to control that. You're talking about a quarterback who tends to throw high and wide when he gets hyped up anyway. He needs to take a deep breath and just let things come to him. He can be a playmaker. He's proven that. He's shown that. He knows that. But he has to take what the defense gives to him. Listen to his coach. Stay within the game plan, and the game plan is going to be geared for him having success because of the Tampa Bay vulnerabilities on that side of the ball.
All right, Bob, I think we've gone through just about everything we can go through to get these guys ready for the matchup. Bold predictions, score predictions from you as the Saints take on the Buccaneers in less than 30 minutes.
My bold prediction is, and I said this last week too, but I've always felt it this way. I think Jameis Winston is going to have a huge game. I think he's going to finally break the 300-yard barrier. And the game is going to start to look like a shootout before both defenses kind of take over. Having said that, I do believe that the Saints, even without Michael Thomas, can come out of here with a victory. What I'm looking for is a good performance from the Saints. We both said at the onset of the show that this is an excellent barometer for where this team is as far as contender or pretender. The Saints could lose this game and still be in decent shape for a division and good shape for a playoff. They could lose this game, and if they have a good showing, still establish themselves as a legitimate contender. And I have picked Tampa Bay in a very close way. I love you, Who Dat Nation, and I hate myself for saying this, but I picked Tampa Bay to come out of here with a 23-20 victory all week long. But I can completely see the Saints taking over defensively, beating the hell out of Tom Brady, and kind of flipping that script.
Well, you and I were both on a podcast earlier this week hosted by some Tampa Bay Buccaneers writers, and we both picked Tampa Bay on their podcast, not just because we were on their podcast and being good guests, but no, I think we both agree that this is a really good Tampa Bay team. New Orleans still has their flaws offensively, and I took New Orleans to lose by a little bit more than that. But since Harris is going to play, I think Harris is going to definitely affect what New Orleans can do. And we obviously were on that podcast prior to the Mark Ingram trade. I think that has a lot of positive upside for New Orleans as well. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay 24-21. My bold prediction in this game, though, is that Mark Ingram scores a touchdown in the Superdome in his comeback. I would love to say he passes Deuce McAllister in his first game back, but that would take a near 100-yard performance. I think he's 89 or somewhere in the 80s away from Deuce off the top of my head. And against this Buccaneers defense, I just don't see that happening. So let's just leave it for when the Falcons come to town next week, and that'll make everybody really happy. So that's all the time we have for the Saints News Network pregame show. Bob Rose, where can everybody follow you on the World Wide Web?
The first place you should go, Who Dat Nation, to follow all of us is the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or SI.com, the team, the Sports Illustrated team page. Individually, I can be followed on Facebook, Bob Rose, or over on Twitter at BobbyR13, where I do post all of my articles on my individual pages as well.
All right. And for myself, you can follow me over on Twitter at BT Boylan. Of course, go ahead if you haven't subscribed to us over the Saints News Network on SI.com. We will be back for halftime. Bob, I know you got a little one at home. Will going as Venom, correct?
Yeah, Will is going as Venom. I will be repeating last year's performance and going as Thor. But I lost my Thor wig, so I'm going with the natural hair. But still a couple earrings, and I still got my hammer, so we're good.
Well, I was going to say he cut his hair throughout the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe anyway, so you're just evolving like the character did, Bob. Don't discredit yourself.
I am, and if I take a good shot to the eye, I might, maybe I'll sport an eye patch too, like you wore at the end of Ragnarok.
I'd like to see it. We'll see if Bob comes dressed up and ready to go at the halftime, but until then, we hope you guys enjoy the game. We'll see you at halftime. If you do any little trick-or-treating before then, we hope you guys are safe and well. We'll see you at halftime, guys.